D.H. Lawrence, was he a genius or a pornographer? A moral prophet or a literary menace? He is, without a doubt, one of the 20th century's most polarizing figures. But the key to unlocking the man behind all that controversy might just be how he saw himself.
Believe it or not, that's Lawrence, in his own words, describing himself at 21, a bright young prig. I mean, it hardly sounds like the guy who would go on to write books that were literally put on trial, does it? He saw himself as this prim, proper, almost priest-like figure. So, that's the central mystery we're diving into today. How in the world do you get from that clean-shaven prig to the man whose books were so scandalous they'd be banned and burned? Well, the journey is absolutely fascinating. I mean, his reputation was just a whirlwind of contradictions. One minute, critics are calling him a great moralist. The next, he's in court, being prosecuted for obscenity. Later, he's hailed as a hero for sexual liberation, only to be denounced by feminists for how he wrote about women. How can one writer spark such completely opposite reactions?
Okay, so to solve the riddle of D.H. Lawrence, we're not starting in the fancy literary salons of London. No, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to a house divided.
The real answer is right here. Eastwood, a small mining village in the English Midlands. Because it was in the cramped rooms of his family home that the central conflict of his entire life, and as we'll see, all of his art, was born.
And this was the heart of it. This was the central conflict of his life. And it wasn't just a family disagreement. It was a total collision of worlds. You had two different classes, two completely different philosophies on life, battling it out every single day, right there under one tiny roof, all embodied by his mother and his father.
As one biographer put it so perfectly, the family was riven. I love that word. Not just divided, but violently torn apart. You have to understand, this wasn't just background noise for young Lawrence. It was the defining, inescapable reality of his childhood.
So let's meet the two combatants in this domestic war, the miner versus the teacher. His father, Arthur, and his mother, Lydia.
And you really can't overstate how different they were. On one side, you have his father, Arthur, a coal miner, a man of the earth, physical, instinctual, and totally immersed in that working-class life. On the other side, his mother, Lydia, a former school teacher who was all about cultural aspirations, intellectual matters, religion, and self-improvement. In almost every single way, there were polar opposites. Now his mother, Lydia, she never really felt like she belonged in that mining community. She was convinced she'd married beneath her, and she felt completely trapped. Her entire response was what's been called a determined resistance. She was going to make sure her children escaped the mines and had the kind of intellectual life that she felt had been stolen from her. And you know what? She totally succeeded. She mapped out this path for him, and he followed it. He won a scholarship to a good high school, which for a miner's son back then was an absolutely extraordinary achievement. Then he went off to university to become a teacher, just like her. He was her grand project, her ticket out of Eastwood.
So imagine having this war raging inside you, the raw physical values of your father versus the refined intellectual ambitions of your mother. What does a budding writer do with all that? Well, he turns it into art.
And he was so keenly aware of how strange his position was. A collier's son, a poet, he once wrote to a friend. I mean, in the super rigid, class-obsessed world of early 20th century Britain, that just felt like an absurd contradiction. He lived and breathed that tension every single day.
And he channeled all of that tension, all that drama, directly into this novel. Sons and Lovers is basically one of the most famous autobiographical novels ever written. The story of the Morell family, it is, with very few changes, the story of the Lawrence family. He just put his whole divided house on the page for the entire world to read about.
Now you have to remember what was going on at the time. These new, radical ideas from Sigmund Freud were just starting to circulate, and the theory of the Oedipus complex gave Lawrence this whole new language, a new framework for understanding that intensely close, and let's be honest, often suffocating relationship he had with his mother, which is right at the heart of the novel.
And that's really where the book's power comes from. It's just so raw and authentic. He wasn't just drawing on his early life, he was practically transcribing it. All those conflicts in the book feel so real and so visceral because they were his own. He lived them.
But here's the really crucial part. He didn't just write one book about it and then move on.
Nope. This core conflict, this family feud, became the creative engine for his entire career.
That battle between his parents, it became the great overarching theme of his art. The physical world of his father versus the mental world of his mother. Body versus mind, instinct versus intellect. Once you see it, you start to realize this conflict echoes through everything he ever wrote.
And you can see how that small drama from his living room scaled up into these massive themes. His attacks on industrial society, that was a critique of a world that had forgotten the instinctual life his father represented. His obsession with class tensions, that came straight from his own dinner table. His entire career really became this quest to find a way to heal that divide, to somehow balance the body and the mind in a way his parents never, ever could.
After the First World War, Lawrence left England and basically never looked back. He became this restless wanderer, moving from Italy to Australia to Mexico, always on the move. And you can't help but see it as this lifelong search for a place that wasn't torn apart by the divisions he grew up with, a place where he could finally, maybe, feel whole. In the end, Lawrence's story really makes you wonder. He spent his entire life writing his way through, and maybe trying to write his way out of his childhood. And it leaves us with this much bigger question. How much of what any artist creates is really just a lifelong argument, a constant conversation, or even a battle with the very place they began?